In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, which ended slavery in the United States. The end of the Civil War in 1865 further reinforced the abolition of slavery. The 13th and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution, signed in 1865 and 1868, guarantee equal rights for all American citizens, regardless of their skin color. But even though the laws were clear, that didn't change everyone's opinion of slavery and African Americans. Many white Southerners had been taught from infancy that Black Americans were not as smart or important as white Americans. In 1866, a few white Southerners dressed in white sheets and pretended to be the ghosts of dead Confederate soldiers. They broke up a meeting of freed blacks. But what started out as a joke turned into a terrorist organization called the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan became violent and went about intimidating, whipping, and killing blacks and white supporters of black equality. The Ku Klux Klan became popular with those who felt the white race was superior. They and other secret groups have reportedly killed 20,000 men, women, and children. In the southern states, African Americans were segregated, meaning they were separated because of race. Even though the 13th and 14th Amendments were clear on civil rights, the southern states got around the constitutional laws by passing the Jim Crow laws. These laws and customs stated that it was constitutional to give blacks separate but equal treatment. The problem was the equal part was seldom identical to the whites' privileges and advantages. The Jim Crow laws specified that African Americans were only allowed to sit in the back of buses and had to ride in colored-only train cars. Blacks were not allowed to eat in all the same restaurants as whites. Blacks had to use separate bathrooms, drinking fountains, beaches, and park benches. White and black children could not attend the same schools, and compared to white schools, black schools were underfunded. This went on for many years, but eventually African Americans came forward and protested the separation of races. In 1892, an African American man named Homer Adolph Plessy refused to sit in the colored-only train car. In 1955, a black woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus to a white passenger. Both of these people were arrested for their actions, but they planted a seed of courage in many others. African Americans staged sit-ins and would sit at white-only lunch counters even if they were asked to leave. In the 1960s, dedicated black and white Americans began publicly fighting legal and moral battles for civil rights. Men like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Attorney General Robert Kennedy, and Thurgood Marshall were tireless in their fight for civil rights. In August of 1963, over 200,000 supporters of civil rights, both black and white, marched on Washington, D.C. and gathered at the National Mall in front of the Lincoln Memorial. There they listened to uplifting speeches that supported and encouraged civil rights. In 1964, United States President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. In this landmark law, discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin was outlawed. Putting this law into action was not always easy and at times had to be enforced with the help of police and military. It was 101 years from the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation by President Lincoln to the signing of the Civil Rights Act by President Johnson. If you consider the United States is just a little over 200 years old, you begin to realize a good portion of our country's history was spent waiting for African Americans to be legally treated equally.
Soon I will be done with the troubles of this world, trouble of this world, trouble of this world.
I was born in 1929, January 23rd. My parents were sharecroppers. We lived on a little farm out in the country. Nobody much was around us, but I was maybe about 6 years old when I realized what was going on. 29 was very hard. 29 was a very hard year. We planted corn, cotton, peanuts. Tobacco was in South Georgia, but we did all of this before we went to South Georgia. It was 11 of us children. My daddy was hard worker. We grew all our vegetables, everything that we ate, chickens, cows, hogs, guineas, turkeys, or whatever. We grew that. We had plenty to eat. We had our garden. But my mama had to go in the field and work for, and I stayed home to keep the 3 children. The baby was about 6 months old. 2 other was 2 years old. I was 6 years old, and she would put her pot on, and I couldn't tell time, only by the shadow of the house. But when I got a little older, I had to go to the field. First, I started to say, putting the joanna, with fertilizer in a bag, so the boys could have it to put in the little thing that they would distribute it. We did that, and it was hard for me to try to work and do that, but I had to do it. I went to school half a day, and the day it rained and we couldn't work. I didn't have shoes to wear every day. We had to go bare feet in the field, chop cotton, pick cotton, go in the field when it was early in the morning. Dew was on, we'd be wet from head to toe until it got time enough to dry. So we come home for lunch at 12 o'clock. We had an hour to eat, then go back to the field and work till sundown.
My God.
Hi, my name is Hilda Gibbons, born and raised Hilda Carroll, from a Brooklyn, New York family. I went to St. Peter Claver's Catholic school. We used to walk, I'd say it was a mile, 2 miles through the snow to get to school. And when we got there, St. Peter Claver's housed just the black children, because around the corner there was another Catholic school, was where the white children went. And it was a noticeable thing at lunchtime or whenever there was a recess, we used to fight each other, throwing stuff at each other, but we didn't think it was anything racist. We just thought it was separation. Now that was one of the first chapters in my life. And I didn't think about it being racist until I went to Spartanburg, South Carolina to work with a family. And that's when I realized that I was different in so many ways, not only just my color, but the way I spoke. And I was standing in the Kresge's 5 and 10. I was a short order cook. Oh God, was I proud to be a short order cook. And the lady came running through the Kresge's 5 and 10. My God, she said, they just killed Martin Luther King. And she ran around, and there was mostly white people in there because we were sitting in a certain area if we worked there. But we never mingled out on the floor with where the white people sat. And I said, oh my goodness, what's all the fuss about? You know, I didn't realize that they had killed one of our leaders, because I still was not up in what racism was. I hadn't been faced with too much of it. I knew there was a separation from us. We always had to separate ourselves from them, and I always carried myself in a way that I had to be humble in their presence, because my mother told me that was how I was supposed to be. You don't talk back. You do what you're told. And you walk on the right line. Oh my God, when I think of what I went through as a young lady, and that's when I realized that the separation between us was not male and female, or not north or south. It was color. That's when I first realized that because I was black, I was supposed to be demeaning. I was supposed to be a little less proud of myself. And it's kind of scary, you know. But I remember when the president was killed. I remember when Emmett Till was killed. And it dawned on me one day that I had to be careful of where I went and what I said, because it could have been me. The second chapter that was in my life that really impressed me was when God gave me a job that I didn't think I even qualified for. The EEOC came to Massachusetts, and they were looking for black people to work in the Hyatt Regency hotel that was opening there. And I was working for the Marriott at the time as a short order cook, and that was, oh my God, that was powerful then. You know, I had a cashier in front of me, and I could deal with money and everything, and I was never discriminated against, I thought. But when I went to the Hyatt to apply for the job, Hartmut Strauss, I'll never forget his name as long as I live. He was German, and he was determined that no black woman was going to work in his hotel. And I had an Irish lady that worked for the Marriott that liked me and decided I was going to work with her. So for the many interviews I had with Mr. Hartmut Strauss, and he rejected me, she would say, if you reject her, you reject me. And I survived a lot of prejudice without even realize I was being prejudiced against, because I wasn't raised that way. My color was never predominant in my life until I went to certain areas when people say, what are you doing working in here? How'd you get this job? But you know, I've lived for a long time, and I've been through many chapters. It'll never go away. I don't care what we do or how proud we are, because we are a strong race. You cannot take anything away from us as far as our strength is concerned. We are strong. We're like a bouncing ball. We're going to bounce back. And we do. I don't care what they do. You will never destroy the black race, because God said they are my children and they will survive. And that's what I'm doing for 92 years. I think I'm going to go to Israel one day, and I'm going to walk the walk that Jesus walked, just so I can thank him for being in my life. Because for God, I think it's the only reason why I'm still sitting here. He kept me. And I'm going to let him keep on keeping me. And this opportunity to let people know that I don't care where you come from. Remember where you've been. Don't forget where you've been and how God has brought you to where you are. You're going to make it.
Okay, my name is Lutricia Ennis, but they call me Pat. I was born in Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, a little small town they call Graysville. That's where I used to live. And my mother died when I was very, very young, and my father had left me there to live with my grandmother. I started school at the age of 6. At that time, we didn't have pre-K or kindergarten, and we used to have to walk to school. And the school, I guess, was about 4 miles or maybe longer that we had to walk. We had no school buses at that time for kids, black kids. At that time, they called us Negroes. They didn't have school buses at that time. So anyway, we had to walk. So we used to take shortcuts to get to school. So we used to go down this hill, our shortcut, and go to school. Sometimes we went through the cemetery to get to the school. Our school went from first grade, I believe, to the 8th grade. But the thing of it is, when we go down this hill, in the back of this hill on the side, white families lived there. And we used to call it the white camp. And even though I was 6 years old, we knew we were not supposed to go back there at all. because it was very dangerous, and if we went back there, we knew that we would not come back alive. That was what we were told. But on the way home sometimes, we used to see the white people, and they would be on a truck, the kids would be in the back, and they would call us niggers. Hey, nigger, you know, what you doing here? And they used to throw rocks and sticks, whatever, at us. And we used to run. I mean, we were scared. And of course, we used to, kids, we used to call them soda crackers, you know, things like that. And we ran because we were afraid. And so that was the way it was. And I was 6 years old at that time. And then I remember a time when we had salesmen that came to the house. And I think he had to be maybe about 20 years old. I was a little kid, so he looked old to me, but he could have been younger or he could have been older. But, you know, when he was selling insurance, life insurance, and he used to come by, and my grandmother used to give him money. And when he spoke to my grandmother, he would address her as Katie Mae. And then when she spoke to him, she had to call him Mister. And I could never understand why this young man would be calling my grandmother Katie Mae. That used to bother me a lot. But anyway, that was a lot what was going on at that time. And then there was a time that these people, white people, used to come through our town at night. It was always at night. And they would come on their trucks and they would be shooting their guns and, you know, waving sticks and throwing rocks and breaking windows in our house. There was one time my neighbor next door, they burned a cross in her yard. And, you know, we would be hiding and we would be afraid. And my aunt told me this a little before I came here today. I remember my grandfather worked in the coal mine, and he worked next to whites. They worked next to each other. And he was a person that was very outspoken. So if he saw something that was done wrong, or you said something wrong to him or any other blacks, he would say something. They did not like that. So one night, she said, they came to our house and they burnt the cross in our yard. And they were calling him nigger, nigger, come out, come out, come out, nigger. And then they were saying something about him working in the coal mine. And they said to him that he should keep his mouth shut and not cause any problems where he was working. But that's the thing that mostly impressed me more of how, you know, the Ku Klux Klans, and they were all dressed in white. I don't know if it was sheets or whatever it was, but they were all dressed in white, and they all had their face covered, so you didn't know who they were. But we didn't live close to the white neighborhood, but we had to go shopping in the white neighborhood. And we used to call them Mr. or Mrs. And they used to call my grandmother, grandfather by their first name.
Southern trees, barren, strange fruit.
My name is Dolores Cohen. Now, I don't come from a large family. There was just 4 of us. I did not live with my 2 older brothers. It was just me and my younger brother. I was 16 years old, and I went on vacation with friends to Evansville, Indiana. And it's a summer I'll never forget, because that was the year that I lost my next to the oldest brother. What happened was adults were talking in the kitchen, and I heard someone say, "Did you tell Dolores?" And I walked in and I said, "What? What happened?" And the grandmother of the family, she's senile, she said, "They strung him up. They strung him up. Just strung him up." And I said, "Who?" And my aunt said, it was Porky. I said, "Oh my God, what happened?" He was walking home, coming home from the service. Mind you, this is a brother I had never met. And that's what happened. He was hung. And I just started wailing. That's all I remember. I just started wailing, screaming, hollering. Because I was looking forward to meeting him. I had never met him.
For the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the leaves to drop. Here is strange and bitter. Crowd.
Precious Lord.
My name is Charlene Hand, and I was born and raised in Mississippi, between Jackson, Mississippi and Meridian, Mississippi. Back in the early 1940s, I remember vividly that I was still young, but a young man came to visit his uncle in a place called Money, Mississippi. And back in the day, a lot of the parents that had moved to the north, Chicago, Detroit, they would send their kids home sometime for the summer. This young man, Emmett Till, his mom, Mamie Till, sent him home just to visit with his uncle. Well, Emmett went to the store. There were not that many stores in Mississippi in a place called Money, Mississippi, just one little general store. Well, he went to that store and the lady cashier said that he assaulted her. And from that moment on, that young man was kidnapped from his uncle's home in a couple of days, and he was lynched. And they found him, and he had been brutally beat up and died. Well, just to say that, to move on, back in the day in Mississippi in the early 30s and 40s, even in the 50s, discrimination was really at its height. It became even worse when the Ku Klux Klan began to burn crosses in a lot of our yards, including mine, because they wanted to integrate the schools. Well, they used that as a tool to keep the black people upset and then want them to go to school with the whites. Discrimination was really heightened because my baby brother drove the school bus, and when they integrated the white schools, they only allowed 3 black students to go to the school, and my baby brother was one of the ones to graduate from that school. But we didn't live around a lot of whites, but that was the only way we had to survive. And
Black people have been brutalized, criticized, ostracized for many years. But I can say what the devil meant for evil, God has turned it around for our good. Because today we are more prosperous. We have faith in God, and we believe that through Him all things are possible. And I'm thankful that that taught me that, you know, we just got to keep our faith and keep going on, because discrimination is all around us every day in the lives that we live.